So at camp this week, I learned a number of useful things from our kids. One thing I learned was that depending on the situation, some of the kids would turn amen into aw man. And the first time I heard that, I have to admit I raised my eyebrows just a little bit. But then I realized that it's actually kind of useful. For example, today's gospel passage is one that I might, at first blush, respond with, oh man, it's a hard one. The Jesus of this passage doesn't sound like the same Jesus of Matthew 11 who says, come to me, all who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. It doesn't sound like the Jesus of Matthew 26 who says, put your sword back in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. This Jesus sounds a little different. So how do we make sense of this passage? I think part of making sense of this passage requires us to step back and look at the context of the passage. At this point of Matthew, Jesus is talking to the disciples about what it means to be a disciple. He's preparing the disciples for the opposition that they will face. And when he's talking about disciples and teachers and how members of the household will also be maligned, he's preparing them to expect treatment like what he experienced, to expect rejection and hostility at times. When he talks about division in the family, he's preparing the disciples to expect conflict as they challenge the authorities of the day and speak of different ways of living. This is Jesus speaking a hard word to prepare them. And we need that, don't we? We don't ever say, become a person of faith and all of your challenges will go away. Ease is not the promise. The promise is undeserved grace, unconditional love, a new life through Jesus, the abiding presence of God, and the freedom to love and serve others. Ease is not the promise. And though ease is not the promise, Jesus also offers words of comfort to the disciples. He tells them, have no fear, you are more valuable than many sparrows. And this feels important because in this one passage, Jesus says it 3 times. I think Jesus understands that we may only need to hear the bad stuff once, but the good stuff we sometimes need to hear again and again. Those of us who went to camp this week had the great privilege of watching our kids experience camp. I want to talk to our young people for a moment. I can kind of see y'all scattered through here. We got to watch you do Bible study and plan and lead worship and do arts and crafts. We got to watch you play field games. And we even watched you do some things that were a little scary from where I stood, like climbing the tall ladder on the creek. That was a little scary. And swinging from the high ropes and climbing a rock wall. It was so much fun to be with all of you and to see how you interacted with one another. I was blown away by the kindness that I saw in each one of you towards others. And it was interesting to be with you as you experienced camp life, which I was a little bit envious of. Driving home, I realized something. The way that you kids lived at camp, the way that our kids lived at this camp, is worth trying to repeat back at home. They had morning worship and evening worship. They did Bible study. They shared all their meals, and they took turns serving and cleaning up after one another. When a kid needed to go back to a cabin or to the nurse, they took a buddy or two with them so they would never be alone. And when someone didn't do as well at something as they wished, other kids would step up and say, "You were so brave to try." And I wonder, what if we, as kids of all ages, were to lean deeper into discipleship and into community in these ways? It's easier to live siloed and unaffected by others. It's easier to be concerned just about me and mine. I don't have to ask for help. I don't have to tell you if something's wrong or if something's not going well. I don't have to worry about whether my neighbor or a stranger has enough on their table. If the focus is just me, I'm only worried about grace, mercy, and justice as they apply to me. And I don't have to share. But living siloed isn't what we're called to do. What we're called to is harder and more beautiful. In today's gospel passage, Jesus talks to the disciples about some of the costs of discipleship. And some of those costs are hard. Oh, man. Our kids made the harder choice by going to camp. They chose to get out of their routines. They chose to put themselves in new communities with new people. They chose to try new things. And they chose to learn in a new way, in a new place, and to help other kids learn with them. We too are called into that kind of discipleship. We are called to walk with Jesus and to let our encounters with Jesus change who we are and how we interact with the world. Jesus doesn't make disciples so that disciples can stand alone in worship. Jesus sent out the disciples for the sake of others, preparing them for rejection, for conflict, and reminding them, do not fear. And Jesus gives us that same reminder. We are more valuable than many sparrows. And so are our neighbors, and so are the people around us that we don't yet know. At the closing of worship at camp, one of the counselors asked kids 4 questions. He asked them, did you try something new? Did you learn something about living in community? Did you learn something about your faith? And did you have fun? And these are really great questions for us to ask ourselves as we walk with Jesus every day. These are beautiful questions for us to ask as we live lives of discipleship with Jesus in response to a God who knows the lives that he calls us to with all their challenges and promises his beloved children not ease, but truth, grace, and his presence every step of the way. And I hope that feels to you like an amen with God.